host, Jen Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as Daddy, and you're listening to Radio Video B, The Sacred Matrix. Our guest today is Aaron Steiner, and he is an author, builder, artist, inventor, and he hails from the Pacific Northwest of the USA. He acquired a degree in fine art and has extensively studied world religion, metaphysics, world mythology, and the hidden agendas of the powers that be. Having developed his worldview early in his adulthood by living in such places as Hawaii and being drawn to certain ancient Mayan temples, he set out to create myth when it became very apparent to him that the Western culture he was from was seriously devoid of any good human origin mythology. This in itself seems to be true simply because people of the West are a very literal culture, so they would need a very literal account of their origins to adhere. The story of myth was then introduced to provide this literal account, not only for Western culture, but for the rest of the world as well. So we're going to be talking about the characters of myth, which are looks like many of the Anunaki. And Aaron has a book called Myth, The Origin of Myth, Aaron Steiner. And I have a page up on AquarianRadio.com if you'd like to read more about Aaron's book, Myth, The Origin of Man. And before I bring on Aaron, I'd like Dr. Les to say something.
Yeah, well, Aaron's, I love your book. And what I like about it is all the drawings, too. That really makes it, because this is a visual age, and it isn't just the words. It's you hit the archetypes right in the pineal with the pictures, with the drawings.
Excellent. So, Aaron, welcome to our show.
Hey,
How
thanks.
are you today?
Doing good. It's great to be here with you guys.
We're excited to have you. So, we're going to give you the talking stick and the mic for a while as you tell us about your book.
Okay, sure.
And
where do you want me to start?
Theories and hypotheses.
In the beginning.
All right, well, what I've done is I've taken the account of human origins that was written down by the Sumerians, and I combined it with the information I found through the Lilith cult information. And when you combine those two together, you actually get a pretty good view of what was going on back then. But I was able to present it all in the form of a novel. So you don't have to sit through some lengthy hypothesis or anything. You just got to immerse yourself in the drama and watch it unfold in front of your very eyes. And so it all ties together very nicely. But the book actually starts out, the prologue starts out on Mars, where they've just blasted through the asteroid field and their reserves, their energy reserves were low. So they end up landing on this ancient plaza that they find among these pyramids, and they fill up their water reserves for their hydrogen-based technologies. But that's how the book starts. But they make it to Earth, and they set up camp.
Now, who is they?
Oh, that's right. They. Big question.
Who are they?
Big question. Well, I'm sure you've heard of the Anunaki. That term simply means those who came to Earth. So, in the future, they'll hopefully be known as the planet that they hail from. So, they come from the star system of Sirius B, which is actually only about 7 stars away from here. So, it's pretty local, I guess. And the planet that they hail from, the planet that's in the cradle orbit of Sirius B is known as Rizq. That's spelled R-I-Z-Q. I didn't know about their homeworld until I did some serious digging. I knew that they were from Sirius B. That was easy to find out, but for some reason, I thought that was like a planet that revolved around Sirius, but it's actually a trinary star system. And I realized that I really need to find out where this planet is. And it's It wasn't easy, but it was actually available in this ancient Muslim text. So they're known as Razikians, and I guess to be technical. And it's very strange to say. I mean, now I'm getting used to it, but nobody uses that term because I guess nobody's familiar with it, or have actually done the math and gone back that far. Because, like I say, Anunnaki is that only, like I said, those who came to Earth. It doesn't really explain very much. It's like a general title. But they make it to Earth, and they'd come here to obtain gold. They didn't come here to obtain unobtainium. No, they came here for gold. And that's a crazy mineral from the Avatar movie. But so they landed where Iraq is, in the Gulf waters of is that the Bering Strait or something like that? But they'd set up some
Persian Gulf.
The Persian Gulf. There you go. The Persian Gulf. And they had apparently been doing some extractions from the waters of the Persian Gulf, but the yield was low. And after some long experimentations and just a lot of searching, they found that there was a spot down in South Africa that was rich with gold, except it was deep in the earth, and so they'd have to mine it out of the ground. And that's when a decision was made on their homeworld to expand their operations here on Earth. And there was a mining force that was brought here, along with a lot of tools, and it was set up. I guess they were getting gold out of South America, but there was a problem with the mining force, that they were having a hard time due to the short days, and I guess comparatively short to what they were used to. And it was hard for them to deal with our atmosphere or something like that. They were just having a hard time. So a lot of off-world medicinal plants were initially brought here to alleviate the tediousness, but they only just got all the workers all strung out and cranky. I don't know, but so the lead character in my book kind of coaches a rebellion, because even though he was firstborn son to the king on their homeworld, his younger brother was more in line to the throne. So the younger brother ends up coming to Earth and taking over. And that's Lord Enlil. He's the younger brother. And Lord Enki, he's the older brother. He's my lead character. The story more revolves around Lord Enlil. But he set up a science lab down in South Africa that I coined the term. I call it the Ebenaru, I believe, was the name that I called this science facility. But they had been doing a lot of experiments with the indigenous animals, a lot of stuff, crimes against nature, crossing animals with other animals, and pretty gory stuff. But they finally came up with a creature that was reptilian in appearance, but it had mammalian internal organs like the platypus. So it was more capable of dealing with the Earth atmosphere or something like that. But just like, so the Lulu creatures, they look a lot like the Sleestaks from the Land of the Lost. And the problem was they couldn't get these creatures to reproduce, because they did end up replacing the original workforce with the Lulu workers, but they started dying off a little early, and they didn't want to have to deal with hiring more surrogates to impregnate and create these creatures. So they ended up adding Lyrian DNA to the Sleestak. And I'd already written the story. Everything was going good. And then my stepmom reads it, and she tells me that it still sounds like science fiction. And I didn't realize I really need to get I need to get some more backstory. So lo and behold, I started reading The Lost Book of Enki, and there was a huge chunk of the story of what happened before they came to Earth, the drama on their home world, how they got here. It's fascinating. This is all, it's like the lead character in my book just sat down with someone and just started explaining everything that happened. Just like, well, that makes it a lot easier for me to decipher. But so the Lyrian DNA, it didn't mention where the DNA from Lyra actually came from, and that was kind of a little perplexing. I mean, it's a leap of faith on the reader's part to just, okay, accept that they've got this magical DNA from the star system of Lyra that, I mean, the history behind the Lyrians is pretty dicey. But turns out I was listening to a Coast to Coast episode, and there was this remote viewer from Montauk who was giving a little history lesson about what happened to the Lyrians and how they'd escaped the persecution of the Draco. A group had escaped to Mars, but the Draco had found them and wiped them out by throwing an ice comet toward Mars, and it just sucked everything off the planet. Lyrians and the atmosphere and all the water, all of it. A very strange story, because in the aftermath of all of that, they came to make sure that they'd actually got the Lyrians and to check out their destruction, and Mars was pretty much toast. But the ice comet pushed the planetoid that was where Venus was forward, and the ice comet is now where Venus is. So the Earth was put into the cradle orbit, and Draco come and they see all the water on the planet, and they're like, well, this is a ripe planet for seeding. And apparently they brought the moon in, parked it, and created the seasons and the poles, and then seeded the Earth, and that's a whole nother story. But it's important because I'd realized that my whole story started at these ancient pyramids on Mars, and I'm going, well, why don't we just send in some teams and we'll take out some artifacts and we'll extract the DNA out of there, and we'll just Jurassic Park the DNA into the sleeve stacks, and bam, you've got the first humans. Very, very beautiful black people. And their names were Adamu and Lilitu. And their first jobs, they were assigned to facilitate the dining tables of the palace of this main spaceport. And its name is Eridu. I guess the original Eden. Eridu, yes. There's one. So Eden is actually the size of a small continent, and there were like 5 cities within Eden. So it always kind of, when I see these shows about them trying to find Eden, I'm going, oh, and it's like in some valley. It's like, you guys didn't research this very well. Eden has 5 cities in it, so it's going to be in more than one place. It's a huge area. So
where is Eden on modern maps?
Iraq would be part of it, and so it's like the I guess it'd be like more of the southern, and then the Lebanon. It's got Baalbek, which is the Lebanon forest, and so it's just that whole area over there. I'm not really sure the edges and stuff, but you could probably imagine what it would have been like. But yeah, the center city is fascinating because they had this giant tower that would deliver and receive transmissions to their home world, and it pretty much the Space Needle. I mean, just imagine the Space Needle, and bam, there you have it. So the Space Needle's in the book. That's kind of cool. But
Space Needle, where did you get that information about the Space Needle?
Sure. It's named the name of the city is Shurabek, and it's where they house their the central computer for their whole operation. And the descriptions I'm seeing the Space Needle. I mean, I didn't say anything about the Space Needle because it's a little cheesy, but I sure describe it very, very similar to what the Space Needle looks like. So when you're seeing it described in your head, you're going, "Oh my God, that's like just like the Space Needle." But yeah, it's like imagine a mission control tower. The Space Needle would make a great mission control tower. It looks very alien. I think they channeled it personally. I don't know, but they got their finger on the pulse because when I grew up in Seattle, and as I was writing this book, I felt the presence of a couple really powerful people who have passed recently that were influential on whatever levels. But the spirit of I pretty much dedicate the book to the loving memory of Jimi Hendrix and Bruce Lee. And I felt like they were kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi as ascended Jedi masters that were kind of guiding me as I searched for information. It's just absolutely astounding how their presence, every time I even mention them, like right now, I just feel like I want to start crying because the energy is that strong. So Seattle and this whole storyline, there's some powerful energies connected. But regardless, the Obi-Wan thing is probably the most influential for me. But back to the cities. They're adding Adamu and Lilitu's role in all of this. They were just the help in the beginning, and it was going to be Lilitu's job to birth a workforce, but to start them out, they just had them doing some basic tasks. It was Lilith's job to take care of all of the food plants, the fruits and vegetables, and it was Adam's job, or Adamu, to take care of all of the animals and that the livestock, and it was his job to slaughter them and have them ready and cook them up for the tables of these large lizard men, the Anunaki, the Razikians. They the males are maybe 10 to 12 feet tall. The royal bloods are kind of, and they kind of Ninja Turtle looking. They have tails, but you can imagine a boisterous, hungry group coming in, royal family, just sitting down to eat. And it was their job to set the tables, make the food, clean up afterwards. And the whole story starts going a little sideways though when Lilitu, she is taking care of all these plants and everything. But the fact of the matter is, when the Anunnaki had originally, well, I won't say Anunnaki, I'll just say Enki and his team, his science team. His science team consisted of his sister and one of his kids, I believe. His sister's name is Ninma.
Right.
And the females, they are a little different looking than the males. They're more bird-like with their long beaks and walking on haunches, and they look like bird ladies. But I'm not sure if it was their son, but it was definitely Prince. Ningish Zeta. He was on the science team also, and it's very interesting how he's presented he's recognized as Thoth, and what I find strange is that he's presented as a Birdman thing, but it's actually like a female Anunnaki, when in all truth he's male. So I don't know if it's just kind of an effeminate expression of him, where he's like, he's not going to be assigned gender, or he's just into non-gender coding or whatever. But it's just strange how he was remembered as a female, even though he's a guy. But back to the storyline. The design that Ningishita had come up with originally was the humans, and when they first got up and started walking around or whatever, they displayed very, very high psychokinetic abilities, so high to the point where Lord Anki had expressed to his sister that the High Council would never approve of these creatures because of how powerful their psychokinetic abilities are. The whole project was going to have to be redesigned, and Ningishita was just like, no, I'm not going to do that. These things are perfect. Look at their opposable thumbs and their genitalia, and reproduce is just off the chart. Yes, they are very psychokinetic, but we can fix that. We can make it so they're not as psychokinetic or psychokinetic at all. They just dampen the human energy field significantly at the base of the neck, between the shoulder blades, and at the base of the spine. Now, I learned all of this before I knew anything about Anunaki. I'd been reading this book written by a man who had been taken into a Taoist priesthood at a very early age, up into the mountains of the Himalayas, where he was taught. Him and his disciples were taught at a very young age the secrets of these Taoist masters. And they would sit in a cave for a year and meditate. But what allowed them to do stuff like that was the teachers would teach their disciples that the gods had imposed these gates on the human energy system early on. They're located at the base of the neck, between the shoulder blades, and at the base of the spine. And so these monks would meditate on these gates, open them up, and that would allow them the ability to, sit in a cave for a year or something weird like that. So, after doing the research, I realized who these gods are. The Chinese emperors have all tied their lineage back to dragons, and there's this, all this other cultures have connection, the feathered serpent and this, that, and the other thing. And it's not like I want these creatures who created humanity to be like lizard men. I'm just reflecting what I found. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people find it very strange that we were created by a race of lizard people, but it just, you do the math, and that's what comes to the surface. So I tell people, don't shoot the messenger. I'm not trying to go against the grain here. I'm just like the little boy and the emperor wears no clothes. I'm just like, this is just what is. I'm just showing the world what I see, even though the world can be blind to it.
It's a very interesting cosmology. It's really studied with Sitchin. So, where Sitchin has the Anunnaki being humanoid, and the depictions on. There's all kinds of depictions in the.
Sure, of course, but those are literal. I understand where it comes from, and I just happen to have a little more of an edge than Sitchin, and I was able to kind of stand back and take a practical look at his work, and then just weed out the stuff that doesn't make any sense and the stuff that didn't fit the bigger picture. I mean, when you've got a big, huge puzzle that is coming forth with a single image, a lot of Sitchin's pieces filled in a lot of the space. And in doing that, it creates a negative image between the puzzle pieces. So you can see what that puzzle piece is supposed to look like and just fill it in yourself. So I had to go in with Sitchin's work, and I had to tweak a few things, the Anunnaki being reptilian, also that they're from not Nibiru, but from Sirius B. You do a little more research, you find out that, the Dogon tribe knows where they're from. And
well, it seems that they came from a society that was spacefaring.
Sure, that is very interesting.
How we're going to be in the future. We're going to be spacefaring.
Let's hope that we make it. I don't know. The next few years are a little dicey with everything.
I can't hear you. Same time. Let me just interject something here, and then we'll go back to you. So we can't talk over each other because they can't hear us. So I was just saying that it seems that they have a spacefaring society that had a lot of different cultures, as we see from what's that spaceport in South America? What's that called, honey? Speak up.
Tiwanaku.
There's all these depictions. There's little grays.
Oh, right.
We have all these depictions. We have the stories. We have the dragons, and we have all the stories. But we have the depictions. There's dragons all over the world, and so it does seem to be, a varied species. It goes back to the Lyrians and the Dracos, which appears to be the first polarization. We were humanoid, and then there was the Council of Hatona. We had the story of the Council of Hatona, where they all got together and they combined their DNA, and that's how you got the reptilian brain stems. We have all these stories coming forth. But one thing that we can do, even humans can do right now, is combine DNA. So something can look one race, humanoid, reptilian, or draconian, but still have DNA from many different species. And we have a lot of whistleblowers that are coming forth and they're talking about their soul origins from several different origins, and their DNA can be mixed. It's not like it has to look like a human being and have only human DNA. So DNA can be mixed within the individual. Would you like to say something, Dr. Lessin, and go back to?
No, what's really interesting is different people contemplate the data and cherry pick the parts that's interesting to them. They make entirely different gestalts, and like the blind folks who are feeling up an elephant. We're all feeling the same elephant, but some people got it by a different organ than the others. But they're all part of the same elephant, and it's interesting to hear your version.
The one question I have is, what makes you think that the females were bird-like and the males were reptilian-like? And how did this humanoid species emerge from the two? I'm a little bit mixed up in the story there. Can you flesh that out for us? So
Absolutely.
How this humanoid species?
Yes. Well, there were some keystones that let me know I was on the right track with all of this. Now, this information, the story of humanity, it has been recorded, and it is in its full account, and that has been coveted and hidden by the elite. It's probably buried in the basement of some Masonic temple, which it's really strange. I had one of their main temples right up the street from my house, and as soon as I wrote this book, they moved out. But I felt like I was tapping into something in their basement, which is really strange. But there's this Gothic cathedral in our city. It's called St. John's Cathedral, and it's a beautiful structure, big, tall, stained glass windows, and all that magnificent architecture. And it's really strange that the building has two gargoyles on it that just don't really have any place on the building as far as warding off evil spirits. They're more of welcoming people into the building, because they're posted right on the front of the building. At the top of the doorway, there's a pyramid, and each one of these gargoyles is at the base of each of the corners of the pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid, there's an eye, of course, but it's not horizontal; it's vertical. And but the two statues at the bottom of the pyramid, the one on the left is a lizard man, looks very much like the Gorn from Star Trek, and
Oh my God.
had like a rib cage and a chest and stuff. And then Robert Boulet's Flying Serpents and Dragon books, he has a drawing of one in the back that just like, bam, just nailed it. It's really easy to understand that that's what the males look like. Now the females have been very elusive, but that statue of that bird lady next to him, it's not just ornamental. That is the depiction of the females, Lady Ninmah, the lady who created the humans. And what's ironic is that, yes, Lord Enki was the head of the team, but it was Ninmah who came up with the human design, his sister. So he gets all the credit. She did the work. And, people say Jehovah or God created man, when it's really funny. It was Ninmah. And she's a female, so if people knew that God was a woman, I think it would blow their mind. But okay, back to
I have a question on that, on the cathedral. Could you please go take? It's close to your house now.
It's not that far. I've got it. There's a couple pictures on my website.
Okay, could you email those two more to me to put on your page because I'm really curious to see those.
Absolutely.
And that
there was some more validation.
Thing that I differ with you. One thing before I get back to you is that there's these cuneiform, and they have Enki and Ninmah. They are, and even Nagashita, they're all depicted as humanoid, and these are ancient cuneiforms. So. It's interesting to look at it, and we still have this historic record of them looking as like humans, and they said that man is made in the image of God. So,
that was the Lulu that were made in their image, but they would not actually make a worker in their image. I mean, that was a mammalian like us if they didn't have to. They don't care for mammals. They find mammals to be loud, smelly, and unpredictable. And so a humanoid worker was not their first choice. And so we're like definitely not in their image. But the Lulu were, that's for sure. And they were the original Adam. So, the stories get confused. What?
To look like this in your cosmology? How did we get to look like we look like now?
Okay, well, now the different races were birthed through a hybridization, because the original races were black, but the very first female. I left off with the story of Lilith and how she was going. The drama was all going to start when she got into the mushrooms, and apparently they beckoned her, even though she wasn't supposed to be eating them. But she took them, and she was able to undo a significant part of the dampening that they had imposed upon the human energy system. So she was able to awaken to her inner power, and she wanted to share that with the Damu, and he was telling her that she was breaking the rules. She needed to not do it. She needed to just do her job and follow directions like he was going to do. And then she got all excited about, because she was awakened. She was like, well, what do you do? I want to learn everything. And so he teaches her how to hunt, and they meet back at the end of the day. And this is where things go sideways, because, he just spent the day trapping and stalking and fishing, and he had, a quite a yield. But Lilith, when she had made her intentions to the forest clear, she had used her magical connection to the forest, and it just opened it up. It just opened up, revealing game animal after game animal. And so she was able to hunt and bring forth a yield that was 10 times his. And so when he saw that she had all these game animals harvested he was angry. He was really pissed off. He thought she was playing some kind of joke on him. And he basically tells her to screw off. And he wants nothing to do with her strange, weird behavior. And he was going to go hang out with a pack of wolves he told her their loyalty is unquestionable. And she's just, I don't know, he wasn't having it. And so he gets all mad at her and leaves. And that was the first drama, you know.
Where did you get that story? I've never heard that story. What was that from?
When they broke up.
When she opened up and got all the harvest and they got pissed off. I'd never heard that story before. What's your source of that story?
I might have. So the interesting thing about this storyline is that as we travel through space, we leave kind of a recording behind us. Like everything that happened yesterday is kind of recorded in some weird space-time fabric. Well, just so happens that our sun takes 26,000 years to circle around its galactic hub. The Aztec calendar documents this. Well, our sun happens to be in the same spot it was when all of this stuff happened. So we're kind of passing through the storyline, kind of one groove over, like on a record. And sometimes, I don't know, it's like I feel like I kind of just stick my needle out and just tap in to the account of 26,000 years ago, just by thinking about it, talking about it. I don't know, it's kind of strange, but I'm almost transported. I mean, I wouldn't say it like as vivid as a dream or anything, but in my mind, everything just starts falling into place, and it unfolds in my mind like I'm sitting in the corner watching it happen and just kind of writing it down. So I'm not sure if that's something I got from historical accounts or that's something that I just added to the storyline. But that is really interesting that you mentioned that, because when I was done writing this book, it turns out that I discovered the origin of a race of beings that we're very familiar with. Now, Lilith, she was removed from the human experiment because she ends up seducing Enki, and because Adam comes back and rapes her, and because he's supposed to be mating with her, and everything goes sideways. And so she gets all angry and runs to Enki and tells him that he's got to do something about his dog. And she ends up like, you know what, he's nowhere near as wise and noble and as handsome as you, my lord. And he's kind of looks at her sideways and like, you know what, I think I'm going to remove you from the human experiment, and you can come live aboard my orbiting space station as my consort. And she loves the idea. So they hook up, they have this intense love affair, and in the meantime, Adam needs a replacement bride. Now, instead of replacing her with the original design, I think they may have tried it. He didn't want anything to do with it. They came to the conclusion that the new female needs to be like the guy. The guy is staying task at hand. The girl is way too ambitious. So they just end up cloning a female off of the guy, who is much more. She's like I look at Lilith as a kind of a masculine beauty, where the new bride is more of a voluptuous beauty. Eve, she's got bigger tits, lips, ass, and thighs. She's more of a breeder, but she's definitely more masculine in the sense that when she has hybrid babies with these lizard men, they don't come out like Lilith's hybrid babies. Now, when Lilith ends up hooking up with the captain of the guard, and they end up having a family. Now, the original female's hybrid babies come out pale-skinned, high cheekbones, maybe an extra digit. Yeah, they're really tall, but pointed ears. She gave birth to the elf race. So the original female gave birth to the elf race, which is a hybrid race. And so now this new replacement female Eve, when Lord Enki got done creating her, before he gave her to Adamu as his new bride, he totally got with her and impregnated her. I mean, I tell people, if you make a hot chick in a laboratory, you're not going to get with her. Come on. So, but that's the case. So Eve's first baby is a royal Anunaki hybrid named Cain. And the word Cain actually means hybrid child. But the thing is, this hybrid child looks nothing like Lilith's hybrid children. Lilith's hybrid children are beautiful. Cain is, I compare him to the Arzog character on The Hobbit, the guy that got his arm chopped off that rides the wolf. He was like the king of the ogres or the orcs. But so Eve's hybrid children are the orc race, but pale-skinned hybrid children. And so white people are more of a hybrid of the original human form. I'm sure we lost our points of our ears and we all got a little shorter. But now this is an interesting point that I was going to bring.
That's the story, like the Vulcans in Star Trek, the 20 years, or the image of Satan with 20
it ties in. It ties in. And what's really interesting is that the captain of the guard, his name is Lucifer, and he was the father of the elf race. Now, Cain, he ends up getting kicked out in the second book. He ends up kicking out because he killed his brother. And Lilith finds him and is kind of infatuated by him because he's half human and half, reptilian. He's the bastard child of her ex, and so she's kind of infatuated with him and she teaches him magic and stuff, but she tortures him and he escapes, because that's how she learned magic, was through suffering. But it's terrible how he escapes and then comes back and then burns down her palace and murders all of her children. And she ends up cursing Cain's clan to be a race of vampires. And so
how did Abel come to be? You didn't go over Abel's parents. How did Abel come to be?
Well, Abel was pure. Abel was the first pure human. He was the second born, but he was the firstborn to Adam, and so he was actually a young, beautiful black child.
Adam was what makeup? Adam looked like what?
Adam was pure
makeup.
He was the pure human. He was the pure male human. He hadn't been altered in any way. Now, when they created the clone, Eve, they used the basic cloning technology where you use stem cells from bone marrow. Now, there is only one bone you can take out of the human anatomy without altering it severely. Even if you take a pinky bone off your hand, it's still going to mess up your hand. Now, if you take a rib bone, that bottom floating rib can come out without altering your worker's, anatomy. So they were able to use the rib bone to create Eve, and that's totally familiar. Obviously, it's in the Bible, but they leave out all of the science. So back to the hybrid children. This race of hybrid children, it was fascinating and just exciting for me to discover that like all these characters in the Hobbit are like real. And when I saw the lead elf character, that the guy that was in Pirates of the Caribbean that he played, a blonde guy.
Yeah.
I see him. Orlando Bloom. When he was like following the dwarves that were in the barrels, going down the river, going down the mountain, he was like running through the forest, shooting arrows after arrow after arrow after arrow, like he was just nimble as a minx, just like he was like a magic ninja. And it's crazy because that movie came out way after I wrote my book, and I know that he's like a son of Lilith, and like, oh my God, Lilith taught him how to do all that stuff, all that magical elf stuff.
attractive. That's why I was kind of taken aback when they said that they were ugly, because elves are always often depicted as very attractive.
Yes,
beings, very beautiful and
they
spiritual and magical.
Yeah, that was the bloodlines. Those are the bloodlines of Lilith, but the bloodlines of Eve were raised to be slaves and workers, and so nobody's going to teach them magic. But Lilith's bloodline, she was removed from the human experiment. She was allowed to teach her children magic, and so they had a very magical culture. Almost, I feel like when I started studying the plight of these elven cultures, I'm finding that they may have been too magical for this world, and it just makes me want to cry.
How did they get to Ireland and in that part of the world?
How was that?
How did the elves get to Ireland? The Elvins culture.
Well, the human history, according to the Aztec calendar, is 26,000 years old. So when I studied the Lilith cult text, and it talks about her palace of Dehanu, this is all stuff that happened 25,900 years ago. This is stuff that's this culture is super old, and there's so many human cultures come and go, and we kind of look at our culture kind of thinking, oh yeah, this is the first time humans have ever gotten this cool, and look at how amazing we are. And it's like humans probably get to be around for maybe 300 years technologically, and then they just kill themselves off, or they're killed off by our creators. The Aztec calendar documents the genocide campaigns they've used against us throughout 26,000 years. But it's like you mentioned becoming a spacefaring race, and I don't know if we're going to make it that far. I mean, it'd be nice, but we're not allowed.
We have to worry about blowers and space
right.
People that we already are. And
well,
the Mayans, remember here, honey, the Aztec Mayans, they have a search of ancient aliens, right? They show them in their ships and they're launching, and we have reports that they actually have out there as well. So
yeah, you're probably right.
We have part of our culture already is spacefaring. It's being hidden, but that might be why they haven't.
I'm just a little skeptical, and I'm really concerned about the fate of the world when you see Australia burning, and it just freaks me out. But I'm optimistic. I have faith in humanity. I think this is definitely the final time they're going to redesign us. Now, that brings up the very interesting part about this. You asked me how I realized that the females are bird-like. There was another affirmation when I found this book, and it's kind of strange. You think it could be just fantasy, but it documents a man finding a underground dwarf kingdom in his garden. And the British government would not allow photographers to go in there, and they buried it up afterwards. But they did allow a stenographer to go in there and draw pictures. And that's, the whole book is just his pictures of what this underground kingdom looked like when he found it. And then he did some drawings of what it looked like in its heyday, or what it would have looked like. And I had this book for a long time. And then I was looking at it the other day, and I'm noticing the throne. And there's a picture of the king, a little dwarf king. And, I'd also was trying to figure out, well, how did the dwarves tie into all of this? Because they, it's like, what's their story? Where's their origin story? And then I was thinking about it. I'm not sure when this happened, but last summer I had to dig a hole for my landlord to fix a pipe down next to this house. And my landlord's I help him out, and then this other guy helps him out who's like a little bigger than me. Now, this bigger guy, he couldn't get in this hole and work very easily. Now, I'm a shorter guy. I got in there, and I mobbed it. It was easy, because I'm not too big to be in these small spaces. I have a feeling the Anunnaki designed a new hybrid workforce to replace your traditional black workforce, and that was the dwarf race. And I mean, what you think about it, the dwarves, they mine, they're miners, that's their deal. And it's like, well, isn't that what the Anunnaki was here doing, mining? It's like, of course they created the dwarf race. They were mining for the Anunnaki. And even in the story of the Hobbit, who came and took all the gold? Smaug, the dragon. Jared Tolkien was channeling history. And that's why he wrote The Hobbit, because he was frustrated that all that history had been buried. And so I really admire the man for what he's brought forth.
What do you think was the purpose of the gargoyles?
The gargoyles were a lot of times just meant to kind of like guard off evil spirits. But that's the thing I was going to mention. When I took a closer look at this throne that apparently was found in this underground dwarf kingdom, it's ornate. It's got like Celtic designs all over it with a big sun in the top of it. But on the arms of the throne, in the exact same spot as on the cathedral, there is a frog head looking thing with sharp teeth, kind of in a weird Celtic weave body on the left of the king's arm. It's like what he's looking forward, so it'd be his right hand. And then on the other arm of this throne is a Celtic bird thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, that is exactly like the cathedral. And I'm like, those are the creators. Of course the king's throne would have a picture of Lord Enki and Ninmah on it. Why wouldn't it? I mean, it just blew my mind when I'm like going, oh my God, this is real. Because I'd already made the connection that these characters were valid, way before I started delving into this deeper storyline. And so,
where did you see this depiction of this throne? I got confused. Where did you say you saw that?
It's in a book I have called The Lost Kingdom of the Dwarves. It is absolutely amazing. And so I'm going to study it a little closer. And the dwarves were utilized by the Anunnaki on a lot of accounts. Big dwarf activity in Egypt for mining purposes. And yeah, they were the new mining force. They created black workers, but why not create little short, sturdy miners like 7 dwarves? All that shit is so real. It just blows my mind.
Got him in Disney.
Our culture has been hidden from us, and then fed back to us in the form of fairy tales. And so it's just amazing to find how much of it is true.
Whatever they wanted to. They were master geneticists, and they made centaurs and minotaurs and mermaids and
that's a very exciting.
Now my question, and we're going to come up in 2 minutes. We're going to be at the top of the hour. Is where are all these these skeletons that look like this? That's the only thing. Is like, where would these skeletons be that are?
Well, a good place to start is the race of giants. The race of giants, they are part of our history, a very, very beginning part. They were an unexpected byproduct of these reptilians interbreeding with humans. And the Aztec calendar documents the genocide campaigns that they've waged against humanity to introduce the newest and latest designs. And they would do that every 5,125 years because it's 26,000 year loop. And so the calendar documents it really well with those 4 squares around the face of the Aztec calendar. Each one of those squares has a picture of what happened at the end of each one of these 5,125 year cycles. There's like 5. They've got 5 of them in a procession, And so when the line closes its loop, it's 6, and so 6 is really significant. So at these 4 points in our history, they've got pictures of what happened, and the jaguar was the first one. And I'm like, how is a jaguar part of a genocide campaign? And I was thinking about, well, if these giants lived in caves, I suppose the Anunnaki probably just starved a pack of hungry jaguars and sent them off into the cave to devour the jaguars.
Okay, we're back in 5 minutes. We'll talk to 5 to pick up with the question.
Okay.
There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, hi, everybody, and welcome back to the on Revolution Radio Studio B. And I'm your host, Janet Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha, our producer, Thomas Becker, also known as a painter, and our guest is Aaron Steiner, author, jeweler, artist, inventor. And before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to Revolution.radio. We got Revolution.radio back up and online, and make your donation. I'm a little bit confused where it is. I should have pulled that up, but I've forgotten. Anyway, take a look on the site. We were taking Amanda, how are we getting donations now? What's the current system? All right. Wonderful. Okay, excellent. So thank you for that. Dr. Lessin.
So, in this program, you've heard many different accounts of origins of Earth and everything. It's as anthropologists really enjoy getting all the variations, and then we see what elements are in common and which ones are added. And of course, anything people add from their imagination, that means where's the image that your imagination comes from? It comes from somewhere. And so it's really interesting. So, like all these rumors that Paul McCartney was dead, and the records they were saying Paul is dead, and that there was another substitute for Paul. Well, down at Baldwin Beach, the guys are saying, "Oh, we all know what happened to Paul McCartney." I said, "Yeah, what?" They said, "Well, he had a sports car, and he was following this great big trailer that was pulling a yellow submarine and crashed into it. So they had to substitute another Paul." And so all of this is fun, and they're all true in some way. And so it's
all right. So, Aaron, I forget where we were. I meant to take a mental note, and I forgot to write it down. We were talking about the lost kingdom of the dwarves. Okay, go ahead. Take it away.
Well, they definitely tie in to the whole storyline, big picture and everything. So I can't really think of anything in The Hobbit that I may have missed as far as significant races that weren't mentioned or aren't somehow brought to the surface. There's as far as misconceptions go, there's a few misconceptions that you find in Sitchin's work that I wanted to point out, I'd already mentioned the idea that they're humanoid compared to them being reptilian. But what I really wanted to point out was this whole Nibiru element. Now, in my storyline, Nibiru is the name of one of their ships, and it physically looks like a giant golden bell, and it's prominently displayed on the cover of my book. But the Nibiru itself, it translates as the relentless crosser of the seas of space. And in the Stitchin books, it talks about how it passes by every 3,600 years on an elliptical orbit. Yes. And
right.
It doesn't, the definition just of what it does, it defies reason as far as like what we know about how planets revolve around in their solar systems. And in light of it not making any sense, I looked at it from a different light and applied it that the 3,600 years, and realized that it makes more sense as a flight plan, where the window of opportunity opens up every, say, 3,600 years to make the trip back and forth. Because I know that if you were to go to Mars, you have to wait 6 months before you come back, or it will take you longer than it would if you didn't wait because of the positioning and stuff. So
he actually got it from what was written in the Sumerian tablets. Anyway, do you want to elaborate on this?
What we know is from modern physics nowadays is that there was what was known as the Jupiter, the Great Tack of Jupiter. Ordinarily, in the formation of planets from the dust and pebbles and bits that are congealing around a star like Solaris, the bigger planets are closer in, and the littler ones are further out. But it was the opposite in our, which is an unusual planetary system with a short, littler planets in sight. And modern physicists basically are saying that Jupiter made this big sweep, it dragged Saturn along with it, and then it created a toroidal wind, which made it go back out toward the periphery. In the meantime, Sirius C at some point went nova and knocked the planet called Ami or Nibiru into the where its present orbit, which is around Nemesis, which is one of its binary stars, and it comes around with Nemesis, and it's but it was going clockwise, whereas all the other planets are going anti-clockwise, and this is because they come out of different toroidal gases that go in opposite directions. It's a bit complex, but you can see a summary of all this stuff on enkispeaks.com. So there's many different stories, but what happens when you really look at the Sumerian accounts in the Enuma Elish, you see that it is indeed describing that first Jupiter did its tack. Tack in a sailboat means you sail against the wind, and yes, it was going, and then Nibiru invaded. And so forth, and it's a whole different story in the Sumerian text, and the Sumerians. Enki, who dictated the text to Dubskar, his scribe in 2024 BCE, basically was the propagandist, just like that person, and told the story to glorify him and his particular subclan, just as if Ralph Nader and Donald Trump were to write history of the United States, it would be a very different world view. And so all these people are just singing their own praises. Anyway, I think your version's really fun.
Right, awesome. That's fascinating. I really enjoy the account of them traveling in from the outskirts of our solar system, and their accounts of passing the different planets as they come inward before they actually encountered the asteroid belt. because it was really vivid as like, just what they kind of had to deal with when they went past particular bodies, and like how one of the planets was kind of drawing them in and actually made sparks come up in front of the ship. And I don't know, it's just like, it's really pretty fascinating to read something that's like 5,000 years old, giving reference to what it's like coming in from the outskirts of our solar system to Earth, which is like, it's documenting planets that I'm sure, have only been relatively recently discovered by modern science, but it's all been sitting there in this ancient text. And I don't know, it's just fascinating to see it all
the Anunnaki were able to actually show the relative positions of the planets and their orbital paths quite accurately. And at the time that these texts were put into pottery,
no doubt, right?
Sumerians didn't have a telescope, and they had to have viewed this from outer space. And there's even space maps that show when you get to by the Kuiper belt of asteroid, where Malduk had been blown up by the Dracos in the death asteroids. That was coming by. That's the Kuiper belt, and that's out there. There is the remnants of Tiamat, which was the Sumerians said was the proto-Earth that got knocked into what became Earth, and in part, and also became the asteroid belt. And it goes on. I think the person you heard on Alone in the Desert at Night, or George Norrie, or whatever it was Stuart Swerdlow. Who
it was.
His account is that
it was.
His account was.
Yes, we know Stuart very well. Yes.
Oh my God,
his account was that the Lyrans basically were first attacked by the Draco Empire, and the first planet they attacked was Apis, and the Apis got people went inside. These were humanoids inside their planet, and then eventually took to the skies and became the Greys, who served the Anunnaki. There's a little Grey that's guarding the Hyperion and Malta and so forth. But in any case, the Dracos were pursuing the Lyrans, and the people that ultimately became the Anunnaki fled the Pleiades and became part of the Unity kingdom there. And then they moved to Nibiru, which had been chased into this other orbit when Sirius C went nova. And so that's sort of their a lot of their story. And of course, their planet was losing its ozone. They had a thermonuclear war, which blew off, caused the same kind of damage we're now undergoing in Earth. But anyway, the Draco star kept past Maldek, which was one of the two planets the Dracos settled. It blasted it, but the Maldekans had found shelter in Mars with the Martians, who were humans like us, pretty much so, with pointed ears and so forth. They were underground, and then this thing came. This Death Star passed Earth, which at that point was a water vapor covered thing, but it drew off enough of the water vapor that lands that two continents, Atlantis in the mid-Atlantic and Lemuria or Mu in the mid-Pacific arose, and the Dracos stayed in their Death Star. It came to the place which we call Venus. The snow melted off. They came out from inside, and they built 7 domed cities. And from that, they placed the moon in its place, came with their beef. They ate dinosaurs and landed on Lemuria. Anyway, the story goes on. But anyway, it's very elaborate. It's all there in CIA documents.
Dude. It's Sasha, right?
Yes.
Is that us talking? Hi, Sasha.
Yes.
Aloha.
Aloha. Gosh, I missed you.
Oh, okay. I'm here. I've been here the whole time.
Well, I'm going to have to come visit. I mean, it's in the cards. Getting closer.
Yeah. Getting closer.
Wow, that is so cool, man, that you got such a complex account down. It's way more complex than mine.
It gets way more complex because the Unity, the galactic formation found. They said we can't let these guys take over the solar system. It's such a great place. We're going to make war on the Dracos, and so they landed their people on the Gobi Desert. That was the Maldekans were who had taken shelter in Mars, landed in the Gobi. And of course the Atlanteans were were directly landing on Atlantis. They just extincted the dinosaurs with their advanced weapons, and they went to war with the Dracos. Most of them went underground in the caverns, and so the Atlanteans were chasing them with stuff above. Whenever they heard them below, they would blast them and so forth. Finally, the other spacefaring races that were interested in Earth called the Council of Hatone and the Andromeda Group, and they asked for a volunteer to make some basic beings. Anyway, I'm not going to go anymore. It's your show, but there's a lot of stuff here.
Oh, Sasha, that's so cool, though, man. Thank you. Nice. Well, good. Yeah, that's some good, really good, lots of good information there. Boy.
So in your cosmology, who's ruling the planet right now? Are they still here? Did they leave? What happened with Sean and all that stuff?
Okay, so therein lies some more of this the stuff I wanted to clear up as far as misconception, because I was dealing with the Nibiru element as far as Series B, but there's also, you've got the elite that are running the planet, the one percenters or whatever you want to call them, and they all do their Bohemian Grove trip, and they're known as the Illuminati and all this stuff. And they're Satanists. They do satanic rituals, and they do black magic, and they just do a lot of weird, powerful stuff, right? Now, they refer to themselves as Luciferians, which I think is ridiculous, because they're worshiping a dark lord. And how could someone who is known as the light bringer be the dark lord? It just, in truth, they're really paying homage to Cain, and Cain is like the head of the dark web, whatever you want to call it. He's the head bad guy, and he's been like hiding in plain sight, and everybody knows about him, yet he's never referred to as like the devil, whereas like Lucifer is constantly be referred to as the devil, when he was actually the father of the elf race, known as the light bringer. He shared his power with the very first human female, and she became super magic. So, I can see them appreciating the sentiment of the power involved behind the Lucifer energy, but they're going about it in a really dark way that is actually paying homage to Cain. And Cain is like the head vampire kind of thing. And so, obviously, the people that are in charge right now are the vampires.
Who's Marduk in your cosmology? Enki's son Marduk.
Oh, Marduk.
Yes,
Marduk is a big part of the second book, and now he ends up being like one of the only of the Rizikians that decide to stay on Earth after they decide that they're done here, apparently. And so, in my second book, he falls for an Earth woman. And he decides to give up his right to the throne on their home world to marry this mortal. And his family is just blown away by, like, how could you give up your throne for this human, And he's all like, well, she's pretty amazing, and I'm never going to be on Ryzik anyway, so yeah, I'm staying. And he has been like the head guy, I guess, because when you look at Bohemian Grove, they're paying homage to this giant owl statue. Well, yeah, they're always etched in symbolism, but the owl's name is Moloch. That's Marduk, very obviously Marduk, that they're giving sacrifices to and all this other crazy stuff. But so Marduk is like, as far as I gather, he would be the lizard god that stayed, I guess you could say. I really have no idea what they're all doing now, because I'm like trying to follow this thread in the dark, and I'm starting from the beginning. So right now I'm just kind of discovering the origin of the vampire race, and then it's really strange. Out of all of this, I discovered the origin of the elf race, the origin of the ogre race, the origin of the dwarves, the origin of the vampires, and there's somebody that was kind of left out in all of this. And I'm like, well, what's up with werewolves? And so I'm studying the Book of Nod, and it's talking a lot about Cain, and I'm learning about the first city and some of the rules that, God, I wish we had in our world today, because they monitored their childbearing, and they, you can only have a kid if it was sanctioned by the state, and no unplanned pregnancies in their city. And so, because humans overpopulate, it's plain and simple. But it was explaining. Cain was explaining to his children and the rules and stuff, and then he brought up the moon beasts. Beware of the moon beasts, because they are very dangerous. And I'm realizing that it hit me like a ton of bricks. Now the werewolves are actually the bloodline of Lilith. That is their familiar. They were taught to morph into animals, and the wolf would be the go-to, because the wolf is the most familiar animal family that Lilith came across when she had to deal with Adam dating a wolf and becoming part of the wolf family, and she was a bit jealous, and she definitely connected with them as people. So if she's going to become magic and going to do shaman stuff like transforming into a power animal, the wolf would be the go-to. And so I realized that she would teach her children the power of the changeling, and all of these elves would become werewolves, not only to protect themselves from and the families from danger, but just some protection from the elements. You know what I mean? Humans don't have fur.
The story of the human shape shifting into reptilians.
Now that is another topic that is a little bit outside the scope of my understanding, because David Icke is definitely crucial in making all of what I've put together happen. Because I tell people the way I wrote my book is I took the Sumerian text that Sitchin laid forth, and I combined it with the Lilith cult texts that I have a compilation of all of the stuff compiled into storyline, so it just kind of brings everything to forth. And then what I've done after I combined the Sumerian text with a little text, I sprinkled it all with a little bit of David Icke, and it all made sense. But Robert Boulay was definitely very important in bringing this all to light, because his book Flying Serpents and Dragons,
right,
it just brings everything to light in a way that there's some comprehensive accountability. I mean, it's like I was trying to figure this stuff out for a long time, and then you just get little tidbits here and there, little breadcrumbs, and all of a sudden the door opens and you're like, hey, I recognize that. That was this. And I learned about that. And like, oh my God, that's what that is. Because as a jeweler, I was selling a lot of wholesale jewelry to like the metaphysical bookstores back in the early 90s. You remember those? They were awesome.
Yeah.
So my jewelry would all be relatively symbolically oriented. So I immersed myself in symbolism, and, part of that process was, understanding what a lot of the symbolism represents. So I was able to kind of break the code on a few things along the way, or just immerse myself in their energy. I don't know, but you just kind of like surround yourself with symbolism, and it's all, it slowly starts to make sense when you start recognizing the similarities. You know what I mean? I'm sure you guys have encountered the same process as you've deciphered.
through and you see what symbols the different gods carry. They've got watch this little purses and the ankhs and stuff, and then you can track them through the different cultures, and some have the horns and the So you look at symbols all over the place, and it's like little
And Sasha referred to it as cherry picking, and that's a good way of putting it, because you just cherry pick what works for your understanding, and I got in there and I used what was usable and relevant and credible and relatively simple. I'm fascinated by all the detail that Sasha brings forth, but it's like so complicated that I'm not sure exactly how. I'm sure it all ties in together with like relevance at very key significant points, but there's certain cans of worms I just don't want to open, in light of just trying to stay on track. You know what I mean? Because there's the galactic drama, and then there's the terrestrial drama, and I'm sure they all tie into one another. And the current pantheon of ufology is fascinating because it's getting more and more prevalent, and it feels like full disclosure is kind of around the corner.
It does. Josh wants to project something. Hold on one second. Go ahead, sweetheart.
I think it's interesting for people who to know a little bit about some other alternatives, and that Lucifer is if you look closely at the Anunaki works, the stuff in Akkadian and stuff, is the name given to in Rome and Greece to Prometheus, and what it is, Lucifer is Enki, and Lucifer's son is Prince Marduk, who is Satan, is the son of Lucifer. And the reason Marduk, what happened is Lama, who is the king of Nibiru, was killed by an upstart named Alalu, and instead of having Anu, who was the guy who was supposed to be the king, the pretender, instead of him coming in, Alalu said, "Look, we're not going to have another civil war. You marry your son Enki to my daughter Damkina, and their kid will be the king after me." And their kid was Prince Marduk, who was raised to be the king of Nibiru. Well, once Enki and Enlil were sent down to Earth, Anu, and incidentally, another interpretation of Anunaki, Anu is the name of the king, and Anunaki is the clan of Anu. But
exactly, that's true.
When Marduk had been, he was relegated to a secondary place. He, for a while, was put in charge of Mars base, where he ruled the Gigi, or known by Christians as the Nephilim. And at his wedding, at Marduk's wedding with Sarpanit, when he decided to ally himself with the humanoids after Enlil had his launch tower at Babil, bombed, and trying to keep the millions of humans from uniting against the 900 Anunnaki. Basically, the Gigi came down for Marduk's wedding, and they ran off with the prettiest girls from Adap's descendants, and they settled in Canaan, and they allied themselves with Marduk. They became the Philistines. And Marduk, after Yahweh, who is Enlil, had his son nuke Sodom, Gomorrah, Zoar, knock out the bottom of the Salt Sea, which became the Dead Sea, and bomb the spaceport in the Sinai. Then they left the earth to Marduk, and Marduk proceeded to be the head of all these different things and play all these different companies against each other. He, for a while, made a slight alliance with Nanar, who was another son of Enlil, who eventually came back and sent his agent Gabriel to choke Muhammad into killing Jews and stuff. And so these guys were assassinated. They're the agents of Nanar, or Allah, and the agents of Marduk were assassinating each other, and different governments were caught between them, and it's a lot. Basically, Marduk won and took over, and he became Yahweh. And in modern times, of course, Marduk has been pretty much in charge Pretty much so. However, lately he has been given orders, and he's got a guard that's going to shoot him because he's on probation. The Anunaki have returned. Some of them, like Enki, never left, and basically they're here to clean up the mess that they made. This is the time, like you say, it's easy for them to get here because we're lined up with the galactic core. But modern Luciferianism, if you really look at it, and I have, and my colleague Russell Brenninger has in great detail, is really, if you look at what they're saying, not just what Christian Bible says, what they're saying is there is no gods. These guys ain't gods. They're just big people with technology and a lot of knowledge. And that's the essence. And if you really look at Luciferism and Satanism, they're just ways of existentialists twitting the fundies with an alternative, which is be here now, baby.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff. I'm finding that the Lilith cult information that I was exposed to kind of governed a lot of my my outlook. And I'd really love for Sasha to take a look at this book called The Dark Mother. And
I'd love to see Lilith in my studies is Nimla, and she was after Marduk was in charge of Iraq, Iran, and so forth. She had her main place in Eastern Europe, in Anatolia, and what's now Turkey and the Caucasus. And she was basically the inspiration for the goddess culture that was present at this time. And this came to its high place in Minoan Crete, which was the last of the goddess cultures. Goddess cultures had free interchange and trade. There was no slavery. There was no wars. There was no caches of arms. But as Marduk and the Mycenaeans started taking over, and when there was this huge disaster, which had Moses fleeing, and when Stromboli went off, it also sunk the Minoan fleet. And so that was the end of the goddess cultures. It persisted a bit in Europe. But the women have been crushed by the patriarchal dominator consciousness of the Anunnaki, which is the dominant organizational principle. And Nanar, of course, introduced debt and having people in debt to each other. And so that's a really subtle way of enslaving people without them really realizing it, because they buy into what we call the benign common narrative, which is a bunch of lies, because government is really about stealing from people and killing them.
Yeah, it's just like rats in a cage, man. And you gotta manage that cage so they don't kill themselves off. I don't know, but that is wow. Very heavy. Wow. The human phenomena is definitely fascinating. I don't have any kids personally, but I am fascinated by humans. I've written a book about creating humans, but I also create these mannequins that look so real people think they're real. And the human. I'm sorry, what?
What are they made out of? What do you make?
What I do is I take a model, a friend, and I use packing tape, clear packing tape, sticky side up and then sticky side down, and then I cut them out of it like a grasshopper shell, you know what I mean, like a snake skin, and I tape it back up and then fill it up with spray foam. And you do have to maybe cut the clothing to get it on, because it's not like a regular mannequin where it's designed to display clothing. These are just, they look like real people in natural positions, and the cops always get called.
You know what this is like? It's like Siri Purdue, where you the lost wax method, where you pour the wax in and then you peel the rubber away from it, or break off the pottery that was holding the gold. This is wonderful what you're saying. Oh, I got to see your mannequins.
Do you have pictures of it anywhere, of your mannequins?
There is a gallery. There's a gallery showing that I have on my Facebook page in one of my photo albums. Oh. So there is a collection, because it's really fun to put them on the walls and alter people's perspective of like where the floor is. So it's kind of my job to make you rethink your view of reality, I guess, as an artist. I love stuff that like
I'm trying to find it right now.
It's like being on psychedelic drugs without taking the psychedelic drugs. Kind of
cool.
Yeah. When art can like alter your consciousness just by the visual. I love the visual tricks, where using the horizon point and making things smaller and making it look like it's a deep room, even though it's just a flat picture. Illusions, creating illusions. It's one of my favorite expressions in artwork. Now, the book's
looking for your mannequins on your Facebook. Where might I find?
You're gonna have to go into my photos, and it's there is a folder in there.
And the album.
The albums, yes, the gallery album has all of those wonderful mannequins, and the girl that posted 3 of them, you can like grab a hoodie and a mask and you can stand there and pretend to be one of the art pieces if you want.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
Wow. How cool.
Yep.
Oh,
like I said, human fascinating. Right?
Oh, neato.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
So that's one of my pastimes. I'm also doing jewelry.
That's like a ketamine.
Yeah, you can see why the cops get called like all the time when I put those things out. Everybody's worried about them. It's so funny.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you broke this story down into 2 books so far, right? You said
the second book is
book?
Yeah, it's it starts out after the trial. Adam and Eve, or Adamu and Eve, they get removed from Eden and they're sent off to the breeding camps, and they have their kids basically replace them, Cain and Abel. Now Cain is assigned the task that Lilith was doing, or Eve was. He was assigned the plants, and Abel was assigned the animals. So Cain and Abel was constantly bragging about how much cooler working with animals was than plants, and there's a scene where they're having a very dry summer, and Abel had let his animals into a reservoir area that was reserved for the plants, and Cain got really pissed off about it. And, well, you know the rest. They got in a big fight, and he ends up accidentally killing his brother. So instead of putting him down like they normally would, since he was Lord Enki's half-son, they decided to just banish him. And Lilith had found him after she'd become empowered, and she was fully magic. She finds him in the forest, barely surviving, and he talks her into letting him come with her, and to teach him magic. And it's a pretty dark tale.
Where was he banished to? Was he sent to another country, or what part of the world? Where did you find him?
This would be in the Iraq area, because they were in Eden, and they just kicked him out. They took him to the gate and said, "Don't come back." So he was barely surviving in the wilderness, and that's where Lilith found him. And I guess she was a little enamored by him, by the fact that he was kid to her ex. Plus, he was half human, half lizard man, and she had been with both. And I think maybe she wanted to see what it was like to be with someone that was in the middle, make love to a hybrid. But she brings him home, and her husband lets her have her little plaything, and he's like, I don't want him anywhere near my children, though, because there is a darkness in that boy that is evil. And yeah, sure enough, he ends up being the Lord of Darkness. But I haven't quite gotten to that point. I'm at the point where we get to kind of experience the life of these elves, day in their life. I've got they're working on their extreme water slides up in the trees at the moment. And kind of exciting to immerse yourself in the day in one of their lives. It's heartbreaking for me because I know that they're all going to be murdered. So it's like I took a really long break from this storyline because it gets really dark. And when I start writing about these characters, I really feel like I tap in to their experiences, and the point that I'm tapping into now, it's not a happy thing. It's really sad, and it's ironically it's the part of the story that intrigued me so much that I started researching Lilith, and the book was the end result, because I feel her pain every time I think about coming home to her murdered elf children. It's a horrific, sad visual.
Hey, they get killed during the flood, or were they murdered in some other
They were murdered by Cain, by 11 of Cain's children, who he trained as assassins. Magical ninja goblin assassins is how I see them. They're just, and then one of them was actually kind of cool. Nesferatu. He was actually had some compassion over what had happened. But yeah, the Lilith cult, the Book of Nod explains who poisoned the water, and then who did this and who did that, and their role in the destruction of Dehenu. And, it's the murder of the elf race. And so when the remaining elves would transform into the werewolves, they would hunt the children of Cain in vengeance or retribution for the murders of Dehenu. I haven't written about that, but it's something I recently discovered that I'm kind of eager to incorporate. But it all revolves around the time of the first cities. I guess Seth was the third kid, and he built the first human city. And when Cain finally showed back up after his exile, he was very, very empowered by what he learned from Lilith, and they made him king. And the list of rules is just fascinating. I don't know, they were definitely worried about your kid growing up and murdering you to take your position of power. So they had rules in line where that would prevent that from happening. But they were very strict about childbearing. Sorry, what?
Okay, go ahead.
I don't want me to talk about the alternate version that the Sumerians and Sitchin wrote
about the first.
That basically that Lilith in that formulation is Nimma. That was a word. And she was the botanist who introduced psychedelics to Earth and found the dimethyltryptamine in the mimosa and all that sort of stuff. But what happened when Cain was, first of all, he was marked genetically. Ningishita made it so that he didn't have any facial hairs. And what you said is quite accurate. Generation after generation, we have lists of each one of these descendants of Cain got killed by their son, and it goes on and on and on. But when Yahweh was having the spaceport in Sinai and Canaan and nuked Enlil, Yahweh started another, built up a great big spaceport at Tiwanaku, and they took some of the descendants of Cain, and that became the South American Indians, who were there way long before anyone crossed over the Bering Strait, and so the South American Indians, and then Ningishita came to help out with the new spaceport, and he brought his Nigerian and Ghanaian assistants, his engineers, and they found a lot of gold near Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico, and then all over Yucatan. He started the Mayan civilization, basically, and he trained them, like the Lord Palenque, to actually be skyfaring, and they are the ones that are actually going around rescuing a lot of the people from the Nazi bases in space, according to our informants. But in any case, the South American Indians were the descendants of Cain, and the Aztecs were something quite different indeed. They were Marduk brought his war against the Enlilites to North America too, and so that we have North America was basically becoming a fighting ground between Hiawatha, the Iroquois who were loyal to Enlil, and the peacemaker, basically, which was Enki, came upon them and said, all you people are speaking Iroquoian, and stop listening to all the men. Why don't you let the old ladies tell you what to do, and so you can realize that you're one nation. Anyway, it goes on and on, but there's many versions. But Lilith is Nimma in so many formulations, and she was a major influence in Japan and other places far in the Far East. The Anunaki, most of them didn't leave, but lots of them have come back to basically Anu advocate. And he said, Ningishita, you want to be king of Nibiru? And Ningishita said, no, I want to go back and see if I can help out with her. So basically they made Nanar became the king of Nibiru. Anu abdicated, and he's helping direct the efforts to help with Earth. Evidently, Yahweh became the treasurer for the whole Anunnaki empire, and Enki is in charge of the quantum computers. So he's, in other words, he's in charge of time and time travel.
Wow.
But it goes on. There's many versions, but it's very, very, very interesting.
Over there and just for a couple hours and pick your brain, Sasha. You're just a fountain of information that I'm just fascinated by. I love it.
Thank you. We just, I've brought an awful lot of it in our books. The latest is Anunnaki, Evolution of the Gods, and you can get a lot of it on enkispeaks.com. Just take a look at it.
So, Aaron, we're running out of time here. We have less than 10 minutes. Yes. What happened? Are you going into the flood story, into the other stories?
The flood story is like, it's gonna, since the flood story happens 20,000 years into our 26,000 year history. So I'm still kind of immersing myself in the first 1,000 years. I'm at the point where Adam has finally died and there's like a funeral for him. So it's gonna be part of the sequels, but I'm gonna have to be very selective in how I get there because I want to get the timeline dialed in. And so this is an era of giants, elves, and ogres, and even werewolves and vampires of all freaking things, if you can believe that. So the next book is going to have a lot of that stuff in it. And it's even going to even be more entertaining than just. I mean, the first book is incredibly entertaining, but when you start incorporating all these hybrid races that you're familiar with through stories like The Hobbit, it's gonna become almost, like very Hobbit-esque in its storyline and its application of like adventure and situation, because I have to incorporate werewolves and vampires and elves and dwarves and ogres into my storyline, which is great because, like I said, they're part of our lost human history, but I'm not really sure exactly how they're going to all fit in. I mean, I already know how the elf race and the murder of the elf race is going to fit in beautifully. And I've got a good feeling about how I can incorporate all of these so-called fantasy races into this comprehensive account and trying to pull it out of fantasy into more of a historical reference, a historical dramatization. But yeah, I like to joke and say that now that I've got the vampire and the werewolf element and their origins incorporated, I can sprinkle in a teenage love story. But I don't know about that. Except Marduk and his love story, that's definitely on there. It's on the radar. But it's beautiful. It's really exciting.
Or just that the wolf genetics makes sense to me because what Swerdlow's documents say is that when the Dracos wish to pursue the Lyrans into the Solaris system, they made an alliance with the Wolvines, who showed them how to make hollow out asteroidic bodies and put their everything they have into it, and so it definitely alludes to that the Wolvines were, and we have our brainstem is Draco from the Council of Hetona. That is our fight, flight, and greed and hierarchy consciousness comes from the reptilians, and part of the reptilians' heritage is Wolf.
Dude, that is so awesome. Like I said, we need to sit down and have some coffee. I'm just going to come over to Hawaii and we'll hang out. Simple.
To me. Now, Randy Kramer at our conference last year said that he actually met with the dog people, and he loves the dog people.
He wanted to pet them.
He said he had to resist petting them because, of course, they're not dogs.
Well, I live with a king chow chow. He is one of the most magical creatures. Everybody wants to pet him. You can probably see him on my Facebook, but people are like, wow, how did you get such a royal, amazing beast? And I'm just like, I don't know, man. But it's like, there's some connection. There's some spiritual connection with those people. And I have the most amazing guardian that just goes everywhere I go. Beautiful golden chow. He's like a big teddy bear. And he's people. He doesn't want to be treated like a dog. He does not want to be treated like a dog. It's funny. Yeah, you guys love him. So, I've been actually bringing him to the alien con.
You're pulling all the mythologies into this cosmology, and you're weaving it back and forth. It's a fascinating project. It sounds entertaining and interesting. Go ahead, Sasha.
I just want you to make one of those mannequins of an Anunaki.
Yeah,
I know, right? Well, we need a big linebacker-looking dude, but I've already got the. I made a feather serpent helmet that a mannequin can wear. I actually, I found a mannequin.
You should give your promo on your book and your website and everything.
Okay, well, I want everybody to know, if you can find me on Messenger, I will send you a free digital copy of my book, and you can immerse yourself in the experience yourself. I'd be happy to. I really want the story to get out there. So it's Aaron Steiner on Messenger, and I'll send you a digital copy. But my website is full of wonderful articles and images, and there's some like a storyboard with the drawings that I did. And that's at myththeoriginofman.com. But you can find me, Aaron Steiner, on Messenger or Facebook even if you want, but it's mostly Messenger. And just get it out there, guys.
time. Thank you so much, Aaron. It was great.
Thank you, Janet and Sasha. I love you guys.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha! And Rohan, Mr. Matt Steiner. I love you too, bro. Okay.
Okay.
What's your name again?